Hey guys, welcome back to my channel for yet another discussion about the HBO miniseries Watchmen. Today I will be discussing episode 7 entitled An Almost Religious Awe. As I do always with these Watchmen discussions, I will not be discussing this episode alone. I would like to welcome back my friend to the channel. I would like to welcome back Matt Crandall. Welcome back, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
This episode starts with a sort of like an infomercial telling us the history of John Osterman. And if you don't know who John Osterman is and you haven't been paying attention, John Osterman is the human name of Dr. Manhattan. So I really like the way that this episode started with a sort of a black and white classic infomercial explaining the history of Dr. Manhattan and
Yep.
what he's been involved with and what he's done for America since he became Dr. Manhattan.
I thought that was really good. I thought it brought us up to speed. It shows us, you know, the quick overview of Dr. Manhattan's history, quick refresher. We see Vietnam, and then we see like all of this Dr. Manhattan festival kind of thing going on where people are dressed up and there's a puppet show, and we've got the even though we're in Vietnam, it's Living in America is the music playing, and I thought that this whole sequence was really well done. It shows like the Dr. Manhattan hype that this universe has, which is kind of unique and something we haven't really seen. We know that everyone obviously currently can send him a message and worships him as some sort of god, but seeing back in the day how that went down and how some people thought his intervening was maybe not the right thing was really interesting. But I just love the way that this is all cut to bring us up to speed, and then seeing young Angela picking out a video, and interesting to look at all the video covers and her picking the black exploitation film Sister Night, which obviously we know she takes great inspiration from, and bringing that out to her parents, even though the video store guy's like, kid, you're not allowed to watch this. I already know you're not allowed to watch this. You're going to come back here in 5 minutes saying you're not allowed to watch this. So I thought that whole sequence really gives us an overview of Dr. Manhattan, reminds us of the importance of Dr. Manhattan, and gives us key information about Angela, all while being presented kind of fun and up tempo until that explosive moment that shifts it to Angela's formative trauma.
I really like how after we get the sort of informational video on the history of Dr. Manhattan, on how commercialized, like you said, his whole thing has become. Because I really think if a godlike individual was ever to show up on our planet as we know it today, I really think that us as an American people or us as a civilization, we would do something like that. Because if anybody knows how to commercialize anything, it's us. We will make anything to make money out of anything. So I really like how they've taken sort of John's whole thing and made him into like a Superman on Earth or a god on Earth. I really liked how in this moment when we saw young Angela in the video store, we got an explanation as to how she got the name Sister Night. I thought it was a really, really cool sort of setup, and it was really, really cool reveal how she ended up getting her name and where she got her name from. I sort of connected with that feeling of her going to the video store and not and renting a video that she knew that her parents weren't going to allow her to see, because I would do that all the time. When I was growing up as kids, I would like rent the most inappropriate movie, and then I would I would wheel to the front, show it to my parents, and my parents would say no. I cannot tell you how many times I've tried how many times I tried to do that with Pulp Fiction, and I didn't see Pulp Fiction until my 20s because my parents didn't let me to see it, obviously. So I connected with that a lot. The shock of her walking up to her parents and then having that quick conversation with her father, and basically her father saying that you can't watch this movie because it's about people wearing masks, and people who wear masks have something to hide, and you'll understand it when you're older. So I thought that was a really interesting parable into what this miniseries is ultimately about. People wearing masks, people hiding shit, and and the and the consequences of what happens to people wearing masks and people hiding something. So I thought that was a really interesting parable. The grenade or the explosion that happens shortly after, I did not see coming. So I thought that was very, very surprising.
They tee it up a little bit, but it is pretty shocking. And as you mentioned, that talk about you can't watch this because they wear masks reminds us that Angela's father is the son of Hooded Justice. So this is Will's son after all that had been through after his family had to move away from their dad because he was out of control with his mass vigilantism. So I thought that reminds us of these connections in that moment. And then to have them blow up in such a horrifying fashion where Angela is right there just outside of the blast radius and sees it all and the sister night tape goes flying. It reminds us that, a lot of the people who take up this cause and become these masked people have been through some shit. It's usually just not like uh, you're perfectly happy in life and you choose to do this. Something has to happen to you that shapes you into that kind of person.
The next thing that we see is grown up Angela waking up in Lady True's compound, right? And when she wakes up, she's completely out of it. Where she falls out of the fucking where she does a face plant on the bed. She falls out of the bed after the giant explosion. And I don't know how you feel about Lady True, but Lady True to me is so fucking awesome. But sometimes she says stuff that makes me really, really nervous and uncomfortable. So I really like the actress's performance because she gives the actress who does Lady True gives her such a zany quality, but such a kind of off quality, and she gives Lady True this sense of I know something you don't. So I really enjoy that in her performance. The one thing that I really enjoy is when Angela tries to get answers out of Lady True. Instead of Lady True sitting there and giving us a giant exposition bomb as to what's actually happening, Lady True injects Angela with a specific drug. And that drug is made by her corporation and it is meant to counteract the effects of people who take nostalgia that it doesn't belong to them. So the second that Lady True injects Angela with that solution, we see yet another informational video. It's like Damon Lindelof. Let's watch a video. We we see another informational video, basically telling the person who's having the treatment what the treatment is doing to them and how that treatment is flushing out the nostalgia from their system. And I was like, that is really, really fucking cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. And we find out that Angela has gone through this cycle of falling out of the bed and asking all these questions multiple times because nostalgia has kind of broken her brain temporarily, and she's going to have to get back up to speed and like reacclimate to everything that's going on. But I like that we figure out how this is happening through the use of a video, which is always convenient and entertaining. Um, Lady True, I don't know how I feel about her yet. I know that I like the actress who plays Lady True, so like I like Hong Chow, so I'm intrigued. But so far, in terms of what she has done on the show, I still don't know how I feel about her. So even in this episode, I'm like, okay, like she's kind of interesting, but like, what's really going on here? I feel like I have more questions than I have answers, and need to find a way to figure out where we're heading with that character.
To move to your point, Matt, I have this sense about Lady True, but on the same note, I think I'm on. I think I am in. I think I am halfway there with you in that I'm intrigued by Lady True, but I still don't know how she's fully going to fit into the picture, so to speak. So ultimately, I don't know how it's going to go down. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with the episodes that we have remaining here. The next scene that we go to, our good old pal Adrian Veidt is getting interrogated by his clones in a courtroom style sort of thing.
It's basically like Adrian Veidt, a few good men in space. Like we're still. This scene was very confusing. I feel like it's entertaining, but he's on trial and they're using his clones against him and as evidence and all this stuff. And it's a lot to take in now that we know, Veidt is on some sort of hidden prison planet and he's trying to get rescued. And we want to know more about what his next steps are, why he thinks he can somehow get out. And this whole courtroom stuff is very entertaining and really well done. It's just still, I'm like, it's so bizarre that you really gotta extend sort of an olive branch of like, I'm trusting that this is going to end up making sense in the long run. But Irons is having a blast with it. So that's at least something cool.
There's no denying that Jeremy Irons is bringing his own spin to Adrian Veidt, because Adrian Veidt in the Zack Snyder version, and I gather in the comic version, wasn't as freewheeling and as funny, like purposely funny, as Jeremy Irons is being in this interpretation of Watchmen. But the one thing that I really like about this whole sort of a few good men courtroom scene kind of thing, these clones are taking all these charges very, very seriously. And Jeremy Irons is just sitting there listening to it and taking it. And the guy ends up farting, and I'm like, you do not give a shit about anything that's happening to you. You are just biding your time for something to happen. So to be honest with you, of all the Agent Vice stuff that has happened so far in this series, this is my least favorite, because I feel that you could take this out and not have it affect anything and not have it affect the present day story that is going on with Laurie and Angela and Lady Trieu. Do you feel that way, or do you feel that this scene needed to be in there for this week?
Well, as you said, the punchline of him letting one go when he's like, "This is what I think of this whole thing," um, shows that this is kind of a mockery, or like this is something that he's going through the motions and doesn't care about. So it does make it feel a little bit less important, almost, because we're just seeing like this is obviously not like actually life and death. This guy's not even taking it seriously. He's just cracking up in the courtroom. Um, so I at this point, I like Jeremy Irons, but I'm starting to be like, I need to see a clearer why this is here. And I feel like we still haven't gotten it by the time this scene rolls around. So as you said, you probably could lift it out and it might not actually make a difference.
I really think that I really hope that these scenes with Jeremy Irons pay off in an interesting way, and I hope that once Damon and the writers reveal where he is and what truly is happening with him, I hope that all of these scenes were worth sitting through. Because you know what? I'm starting to believe that they're just there to be quirky. And I'm not exactly seeing how everything is going to match up with everything. Rather interestingly, as soon as this A Few Good Men court sequence is done with Adrian Veidt, or AKA Jeremy Irons, the camera does something rather interesting. It pulls into his face in the courtroom, and then it pulls out looking at the statue that Lady Trieu has in her arboretum. So I was like, I wonder what's that. I wonder what that is about. So I'm hoping that will ultimately be explained, because it makes no sense for that shot to be in there. So I'm like, that has to be something. I wonder what that is. Sure,
Mhm.
I have my theories on what it is, but I don't really want to talk about that until we maybe get an explanation on that, or maybe we won't. So the next thing that we see Laurie going to talk to Jed's widow, and she's in the car, about to step onto her property, when she gets a call from PD over her radio, and PD is actually checking in on LG because uh, a few episodes ago, as those of you who are watching our reviews know, LG got a visit from the Seventh Cavalry, and the Seventh Cavalry went to go and kill LG because he served his purpose and now he was dangerous, so they went to go kill him. So PD went to go check up on him, and somehow LG killed like four or five people by himself, and is now missing. So I'm like, what the hell? Where did he go? Another important key is that PD mentions LG didn't call this in, and he asked Laurie if he should call it in, and Laurie says, "Don't call it in. Just sit there and wait for me. I'll be there as soon as I can. I'm about to talk to Joe's widow." So that's really interesting that LG didn't call it in. It's also interesting that Laurie told PD not to call it in himself.
Yeah, I thought it was good because we have wondered what happened after the Seventh Cavalry rolled up on his place from 2 episodes ago, and so now we're seeing the aftermath that he took them out, and the reason that Laurie sent people there is because she has been kind of wondering, why would LG set up Angela? Why did he roll on her? And that's like a key piece that she's wondering. So she was thinking maybe he's part of 7th Cavalry and wanted her out of the way for some reason. We know he was trying to get her out of the way for the 7th Cavalry, but not because he's a member of them, but because they were going to kill her if he didn't do it. And so I thought that that was interesting. And, PD says, well, he's not 7K because he's killed so many of them here, but it looks like there was a huge skirmish and now he's in the wind and we don't know where he is. And obviously, because he didn't call it in, then it lets us know that he is still unsure of who he can trust, who he can actually go to for help, because the police station might be compromised. There might be more members, because this whole conspiracy goes really deep. And that, of course, leads into the Laurie stuff just after this, how far this conspiracy goes and what's actually happening. But I thought I was glad that we finally figured out what was going on with LG, because we haven't seen him, because that whole other episode was in a different time. And he's one of my favorite characters. So I'm glad that we at least addressed it, even though he's not really in this episode very much. We at least said, like, don't worry, we haven't forgotten this guy. It's not like we are never going to revisit this. So I thought that was quite interesting and really laid out, this state of unease that is throughout their whole department.
Do you think it would have been a better idea to sort of put a subplot in last week's episode addressing the LG stuff at the beginning of last week and then pivoting to the nostalgia trip with Angela? Or do you think the nostalgia trip with Angela was so important that they chose to give it its own standalone episode sort of thing?
I think that you're right. That's why they did it. They knew that it was like the thematic meat of the series, and the really heavy, you know, racist themes that run through and how that corrodes everything. So they didn't want to dilute that episode by having like the detective action stuff overwhelm their really central thesis statement of the themes of the show.
We pick up with Laurie talking to Judd's widow in her house. And Laurie sort of floats the idea that Jed in some way could possibly be connected to the 7th Cavalry. And she floats the idea that also Senator Keene was involved with the 7th Cavalry, by some way. And the one thing that she uses to sort of back up her position is these tapings of Angela saying this specific word when she was under the influence of nostalgia in last week's episode, right? And she also floats this idea that what if Senator Keene put forth the whole thing of the Keene Act to eventually give him enough political power to get to the White House. But she also indicates that possibly Senator Keene is a part of the 7th Cavalry. And while Judd's widow is listening to this, she's sort of like, hmm, that's interesting. But when Laurie finishes, the most unusual, weird, sort of wacky thing happens. Instead of Judd's widow sitting there denying it or doing whatever 99% of writers would write, she goes, well, oh, fuck. That was the original plan. But now we have another one. And she grabs like a 50 style remote and she pushes it and nothing happens. She pushes it again, and the seat that Laurie is sitting in, the floor around her seat opens up and she falls to a trap door in Judd's house. And I'm like, who the fuck has a trap door in their house? So after that, happens, Judd's widow gets a call, and whoever she's speaking to, she goes, so Laurie, detective, Laurie Blake is here. What do you want me to do? Kill her or what? And I'm like, what the, of all the things that I thought of all the ways I thought this conversation was going to go, I was like, this is not the way the conversation was going to go. So I'm really happy that the writers really decided to waste no time and just decided to come right out with it.
Yeah, the scene where Laurie lays it all out and she says, I think your husband was involved in this stuff because he had this secret room with the hood, and I think that Keen is involved, and I think it goes as far back as the White Knight was actually something that they helped orchestrate to create this Keen Act. So the murder of all of these police officers that we knew as this traumatic event that changed the landscape of everything, she thinks is part of this giant conspiracy that Judd, who Angela looked up to and was her mentor, he knew about all of this and knew that it was going to go this far. And I just like when, you know, his widow says, am I supposed to be shocked right now? Is that what you want to hear? Like, do I have to even go through the motions of this charade? Like, yeah, we're caught. Fuck you. This is what we were doing. But the White House isn't the end goal. President is small potatoes. Like, this is about something bigger. We've got more on our mind. And then when she pulls the trap door thing and Laurie's like, what's going on here? And then she's hitting the button and hitting the button. And then Laurie falls through a trap door. I thought it was great because it's comical in that it feels like something a supervillain in a ridiculous Saturday morning cartoon show would have. But also in everything we know about this world, it also kind of made perfect sense that like weird shit like this just happens. So I liked that they didn't try and have this woman deny and wiggle out of it when she realizes that Laurie is up to speed on most of what they've been doing. She just says, you got us, but you're too late. You can't stop it. And I'm opening the friggin' Rancor pit and you're falling down. Tough luck. So I thought that was really, it was hilarious. And it was like, what in the absolute hell? But I did like that finally we're getting more of the pieces, which explains why Judd's widow, not that she didn't look sad that her husband died, but she has looked like she's got more on her mind than just the grief of losing her husband. Every time we've checked in with her, she did seem like she knew more than she was letting on.
This might be the most obvious question ever once I pose it to you. Do you think that Judd possibly knew that somebody knew he was 7th K? Because I don't think that their plan was for Judd to die and get hung by Will. So I really think that that uh, sort of made them possibly accelerate their plan, because as you mentioned, um, Judd's wife is not broken up by her husband passing. So do you think that they had like some sort of contingency plan if something happened to him at some point?
Yeah, well, I'm sure that that's sort of what they're dealing with now because they definitely didn't know that Hooded Justice was going to come out of the woodwork and murder a guy who was instrumental to their long-term goals. So I think that we're seeing them roll with that, but there's more at stake than you can take this one guy off the board and the plan will still go ahead. So they definitely, that wasn't something they accounted for because I don't know that anybody knew that Will was going to magically show up and throw such a wrench into their outfit.
So continuing with with Laurie's storyline for a moment. The next time we see Laurie, she's tied up in a chair, and she is in the bowels of of the Seventh Cavalry's headquarters. And before as she's getting her bearings, we see members of 7th K playing with these electric batteries. And Laurie herself is in front of a giant cubicle chamber. And you're like, what in the holy fucking hell are they doing? Now, this really reminded me of an episode earlier this season where LG came across 7th K and he saw that they were building some sort of transportation device playing with basketball. So maybe what Laurie is sitting in front of right now, this giant cubicle thing, is what they were building. But still, we have no idea what in the fucking holy hell is this thing is. The only thing that really caught my eye, and I think that's really critical about the scene, is two things. One, the batteries that the 7th Cavalry are adjusting and installing, they are Lady Trieu equipment. So I'm like, where did these motherfuckers get Lady Trieu batteries and Lady Trieu technology? So I'm like, wait a minute, does that mean that this 7th Cavalry is in some sort of league with Lady Trieu? Or do you think that they stole the batteries per se? The other thing that I really love is when Big Bad Senator Keene comes in. I really like him as a character, although, as I said before, he's a racist asshole. But the actor plays him with such a level of style and pizzazz where you're like, I know you're an asshole, but I like your performance.
Right.
He comes in, he sits by Laurie, and he tries to explain that 7th K isn't racist. That I didn't believe for one fucking second, because any racist in any time, the first thing that they try and do is tell you, oh, no, I'm not racist. I'm not racist. I just don't like the way things are. So he goes through that sort of speech. I don't like the way things are, and we are trying to rebalance the scales because we think that the scales have gone too far the other way. And Laurie, in true Laurie fashion for this series, is so fucking over it. She's like, God's sakes, I don't give a fuck what you say. I don't give a fuck what you're going to do with that thing. And basically, I don't give a fuck about anything. I don't care. And before Keene walks away, he goes, well, Laurie, let me tell you something. You are absolutely going to give a fuck about our plan. And you are absolutely going to give a fuck about who we're going to put in that cubicle thing. Because instead of going for the presidency, I thought it would be a good idea if I turn blue. These motherfuckers want to capture Dr. Manhattan. But how? I'm like, I'm still thinking like, that's not possible. Dr. Manhattan's not even on Earth. How the fuck are they going to get him?
What he explicitly says is, what's better than capturing Dr. Manhattan,
Right.
becoming Dr. Manhattan? So we find out that what they have been doing this whole time is trying to harness the power to be able to somehow recreate the circumstances that created Dr. Manhattan to allow them to become a Dr. Manhattan, to become the powerful entity that no one else can stop. And then they will have the ultimate control to balance the world as they see fit, because after Dr. Manhattan intervened at Vietnam, he fucked off. So he has not been around as a protector for the United States or for the world. He has just exiled himself and nobody knows where he really is. They said people thought he was on Mars, but motherfucker ain't there. And so like, we're using all of this technology. And yes, we do realize they must be working with Lady Trieu because it's her technology that they are manipulating. As he says, we've been doing this because we can't reach out to Dr. Manhattan. All these messages go nowhere. He's not listening. He doesn't care. But if we can take his power and transfer it to someone who does care, then we can create a better society. And it's like, okay, this is supervillain shit 101. And it's interesting because we are unclear how they are going to still do this because we don't know where Dr. Manhattan is. And we also don't know if this technology is going to work because, as this episode reminds us, John Osterman, it was a fluke that turned him into Dr. Manhattan. It was the perfect set of circumstances that even Veidt with his clones doing the play, like he can't recreate that exact moment perfectly. So 7K trying to recreate this, how are they going to do this in a way that doesn't just kill the person in the booth and actually allows them to harness the power? Um, Makes us wonder, you know, what is Lady Trieu up to and how deep is her involvement? Because obviously it's her technology and her working with Veidt somehow starting to see the ends of these strings kind of start to get tied together by the end of this episode. And especially in a big way after we get the Lady Trieu Angela scene, then that's where it really becomes clear. Okay, we got 2 hours left to finally put this shit in its place. So I did really like that scene with Keen where he tells Laurie, and Laurie is still her like, you gotta be kidding me. I just trying to do my job. Leave me the fuck alone. And he even says, I knew sending you here was a risk, but we had to do it. And you've ended up being smarter than I thought you could be. And Laurie's just like, why did you get me involved in this crap? I don't want to be here. I don't care. So I love how put out she is at all points.
And you make a really, really good point about Lady Trieu's involvement and about how the Seventh Cavalry is going to somehow harness the power of Dr. Manhattan to become Dr. Manhattan and to recreate that experiment. I have no doubt that if anybody can figure out a way to become Dr. Manhattan, or if anybody can figure out the technology that it will be necessary to do that, somehow I think it's going to be Lady Trieu. Because the shit that she can do with her company, she's a she created nostalgia. Like how in the world did she do that? Right? And and also it has been said that that the blue boxes to talk to Dr. Manhattan are also a Lady Trieu invention. So Lady Trieu is a once in a generation mind. So with that being said, I believe that if anybody can figure out how to get 7K what they want in Dr. Manhattan, it's Lady Trieu, but I don't understand, or I don't see how Lady Trieu will be comfortable helping out these racist assholes. Because Lady Trieu does not seem like a person that associates herself with redneck homophobic dickbags. I don't know how you feel, but that's how I feel.
Well, what I feel when we know that they're kind of working together is that Lady Trieu is using them as a means to an end, and there's probably going to be an ultimate betrayal later that these rednecks are not going to see coming when they thought they would be able to turn themselves into Dr. Manhattan. And after we make sure that this thing doesn't kill everyone involved, Lady Trieu is going to be like, not you idiots. It's got to be somebody of my choosing. There's also a key scene that's probably right around this time where we catch up with Cal again real quick, where he wants to talk to Angela and he knows that she's being held at Lady Trieu's compound to a hologram of Lady Trieu's assistant, who's actually her daughter, who's actually her mother, who's some like Chinatown bullshit going on. But so they reintroduce us to remind us early in the episode that Angela's husband is still out there and he's concerned about where she is. And Lady Trieu is like, oh, good to see you, guy. But like, no, we're not. Her assistant says, you're not talking to your wife right now. We'll pass messages along and she's fine. Don't worry about it. Everything's cool. And Cal's kind of like, I'm a little bit uneasy about what's going on here, but okay.
So with that, I would like to move to the Angela stuff, because the Angela stuff, especially where we are right now in the episode, I think is the most intriguing. Angela, while she's healing and while she's getting the nostalgia sucked out of her system, she is really like she has her mindset on talking to Will, because Lady Trieu basically indicates that the wires that she's hooked up somehow feed into are connected to Will. So she wants to speak to him, and she wants to, for some reason, she wants to talk to him. When Lady True says, "Why would you want to talk to him? You spent the last week being him." So she doesn't really understand why she is so hell bent and so anxious on getting to talk to Will. So it's Angela's whole thing to escape the escape her confines of the Lady True compound to talk to Will. So at some point she does that. She starts to follow the wires that are connected to her, and she goes to this room to where this is a really freaky Damon Lindelof Watchmen thing. I thought she enters this room that have all these monitors, and obviously these monitors are tracking the nostalgia being sucked out of Angela's system. But the one person that we thought was going to be behind that door, Will, wasn't or isn't behind that door. The thing that is sucking Angela's nostalgia out of her system and where that thing is going is into a giant elephant. I thought that was a really interesting, unexpected way to sort of deal with that.
I didn't. Obviously, nobody saw that coming. I think if you claim that you knew there was going to be an elephant behind there, that you're full of shit. It's one of those like weird, what the hell is happening moments. And then you're like, is Will in the elephant? What is going on here?
The next scene that we see is we see Lady True and Angela sitting down to have dinner, right? And Lady True starts asking Angela all these questions. She goes, "So why'd you leave Vietnam, right?" Uh, Angela says, "I just felt, me and Cal felt that it was time for, us to leave and start somewhere new." And then Lady True intimates that she knows about Cal having his accident. And Lady True says something very interesting. She says, "You know, people having full amnesia after a terrible accident is very, very rare. It almost never happens." And I'm like, why would she say something like that? The way that she said it was like she knew that something that Angela was saying or something with Cal's story is off. And I sort of think that Lady True knows way more than what she's saying. The next thing that the, the next thing that I find really, really concerning and really, really interesting, and I was like, this doesn't sound great. Um, Angela says, "So what does your clock do?" And Lady True says, it's just a clock. It's going to help me. It's going to help me change the world, right? I I created this company to change humanity, and I'm going to save it, right? So the way that she said that, I'm like, wait a minute. That sounds a little bit. That sounds a little bit um like almost like supervillain crazy. Because who would say something like that? Like who would say my main purpose is to save humanity from themselves? Nobody would say that.
Right.
But Lady True says that in the conversation. And then Angela brings up a really, really short scene that happened in the episode when Angela's assistant, that little child, came to do some read her a bunch of card games to check her memory out. And she says to Angela that she has nightmares about this old woman in this village. And Angela puts together, as Matt intimated earlier, that the little child that Lady True has walking around and is basically her assistant isn't her child at all. It's her mother. And I'm like, what kind of person is this woman? She has a clone of her mother. She has this giant empire, and sometimes she says crazy things. And the other thing that she says that really, really was like disconcerting to me is that she says, "Oh, I'm about to accomplish the biggest thing in my career, and why wouldn't I want to have my parents with me? And then Angela says, "What about your father?" And she goes, "He'll be here soon too." And I'm like, "What is she talking about?" We don't. I'm like, so. This scene is great because it poses so many questions, but it gives us no answers.
Yeah, so it gives us a ton to think about and certainly opens up theories leading into the last two episodes where obviously Lady Trieu is so obsessed with Cal and his amnesia and the accident, and then her mother is a clone that she brought back because she wants her parents to witness this magic moment that she's about to achieve, the crowning of her whole career. And we're like, what in the absolute fuck? And when Angela says, like, what about your father? And she's like, don't worry, he's going to be here. We start to remember the connection between Trieu and Vite, and we start to think, is this what's happening here? I think it really starts opening those doors, but it's not explicitly said, but we start to think, is somehow Adrian Veidt involved in this and is her father or what's going on? And as Angela's trying to get out, as she's hearing like this horrible supervillain plan and whatever, she's like, I just gotta go home. I gotta go. I gotta get out of here. And as we're heading into the last part of the episode, Lady Trieu has laid so much out for us. But then she goes even one step further, where she says, Dr. Manhattan is on Earth. Not only is he on Earth, he's pretending to be a human being. And I have a way of finding out where he is, and I'm going to get him to finish my plan here. And that's where Angela's like, okay, chick, I got to bounce. And Lady Trieu is like, I've just told you that Dr. Manhattan is pretending to be a human, and you have no follow-up questions. What is that about? And Angela's just like, gotta go. Peace out. See ya. And so we start to realize before the final scene of the episode, okay, Angela has known more than she has let on about whatever this Dr. Manhattan, where Dr. Manhattan is and what's going on. Because as Lady Trieu said, I just told you something fucking insane, fucking mind blowing, and you didn't even flinch. Why is that? And so this is something that like I did not see coming at all. And when we finally get to that final scene where we reveal that Angela has been married to Dr. Manhattan and that Cal is Dr. Manhattan, it blew my fucking mind. And it smashed his fucking mind with a hammer. So I thought that the way that they end this episode by laying out a lot of the supervillain plan and then showing us that Angela has known more the whole time and that Cal's accident was not a real accident, um, showed that these people have been thinking about all the ins and outs that this series would take heading into this finale where we've got two episodes left and finally all roads are starting to converge and in a way that is unexpected and feels fresh and that we didn't necessarily anticipate.
I really, really loved a lot of things about this episode. Like I mentioned earlier, I am on the fence about Lady Trieu. I tend to go lean towards she's a really cool character. She has these sort of strange tendencies, but I'm not quite sure on her. And I really liked how we got to see Angela's backstory in Vietnam. And we also got to see, just real quickly, about how Angela was inspired to become a police officer. So I really, really like how Damon and his writers put that in there, but also everything that happened with Laurie and find and getting more clues about the Seventh Cavalry's grand plan. But the point in this episode where, if you were watching this back when it was coming out, the point when you stood up and said, "Give this show all the fucking Emmys right now," if you didn't do it last week, you were certainly doing it in the final scene when Angela takes a hammer to Cal and starts digging in his head and takes out this metal thing, and the camera does a slight push in to Angela's face, and her eyes reflect something blue. And you're like, holy fucking crap! How the fucking hell? So, going into the next episode, I have no fucking idea what is going to happen, but I'm so here for it. and I can't wait to see what the final hours of this miniseries has in store for us. But before we go, Matt, as we do every week, if the folks at home want to talk to you about anything at all, will be the best place for them to find you at?
On Twitter at Matt Crandall, on podcast platforms Radio 815, the JJ Abrams podcast, or on YouTube at Armchair Directors. If you want to go on there, lately we've been talking about Air and Indiana Jones. So we've got a few videos on there now.
All right, guys. And if you want to talk to me about anything at all, you can find my stuff at CreekFanatic88 on Twitter. But until next time, as I say often, I'll see you guys when I see you.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.